We need to pull some Holdo maneuvers.
This is where the fun begins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Holdo Maneuver podcast. I'm Mark,
and I'm Mike. We're not doing that. Okay.
Well, yeah, we can. You already did it, so that's fine. We're just gonna keep going from here. But yeah, hey, Mike.
Yeah, we're two hardworking dads trying to immerse ourselves in Star Wars and fit into our very busy lives. We're prepared, folks. We're prepared.
We are. We're OCD. If this is your first time listening and/or watching, this podcast will share our thoughts on different topics from a galaxy far, far away. Now, you may see that there's two other guests on the screen with us if you're watching. If you're listening, you haven't heard them yet, so you don't know that they're here. But
they're muted.
I have a question for both of them and for Mike. So, Adam and Paul, yes. Why did the Disney-era Star Wars fan become a great debater?
I don't know why.
Oh, God. They're not, though.
Because they were granted the rank of master, but they are not on this council.
Oh. Well, I actually like that. That's good. That's good. I like that. That's good. I you know what? I'm into it. I'd rock that joke.
It's one of your better ones.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, with that all being said and making a joke like that, this episode is What is Canon? So, if you have been following
I'm Canon.
Yeah. Yes, you are.
My hashtag. I'm Canon.
You are not Legends. But, so the past, I don't know, it was 2 months or so, we talked about the Acolyte, which, everybody on their internet loved. Nobody had any,
nobody was
criticisms
butthurt about it
to say about it. No one had any theories to say about it as it were. But so we're here today to kind of talk about what is canon. What is canon
for
Star Wars now?
We'll talk about what is Kodak about Star Wars.
Yeah, maybe if we have extra time, we'll go into
Fujifilm
and to Nikon too. We'll see. But so because of this very special episode, Mike and I are kind of handing over like the reins to this. So we essentially are now the guests on this episode, and now Adam and P-Thug, aka Paul, will now be your host for this episode. So Paul,
this is
Adam.
Okay.
Take it away. Tell us what canon is.
Adam, you go first. I won't shut up. So you go.
Yeah.
Please go first.
Yeah. So, the idea of canon just changed a little bit when Lucasfilm was sold to Disney. So they sold that in 2012. So I believe 2014 is when all of the old EU was scrubbed. And to make way for canon. So now there's canon, which is the official Disney canon, which is the movies, the Clone Wars TV show, and I think that's it. And then everything else has been relegated to Legends, which is still being published and is still available, and people can find it if that's your thing. But I understand why that designation was made, because it had to be, because you had all of this material written by so many different people, and you couldn't possibly do films, especially sequels, if they had maintained all of that. It just wouldn't work. So there's a very logical reason for why this change was made, and all of it's still available, but they had to make that change. And so now, obviously, when you go on like Wikipedia, you see a section for each character or topic. It says canon or legends, and that has come up quite a bit in the last Star Wars TV show. But yeah, that's been the way that this has been designated, and I think it's working pretty well, and canon seems to be pulling certain things from Legends, and it's adapting certain storylines, certain characters, and doing the best they can. But yeah, I think it was a necessary change because you needed to do that because you can't have these sequels dependent on that time that Han Solo punched a space otter. So you needed to make that change. Which great panel if you haven't seen that comic panel, but just look it up. You can probably find it pretty easily.
I need to see him punch a space otter.
Yeah.
Hey, where is it from the Marvel? Was it from the Marvel years, or was it from Dark Horse?
I'm not sure if it's Dark Horse or Marvel, but I want to say it was Dark Horse. That seems I don't know.
Yeah,
they had the weirder stuff, I think.
Well, Marvel had like the really, really out there stuff. Like we're talking like the super out there. Like, but that's a whole different podcast, as I love to say. So if we're piggybacking off of Adam here and talking about canon and what is canon, I mean, I think canon, what I would say is, the difference between now and what we had before, obviously, is that everything is supposedly under one cohesive story, if you will, right? I mean, and now you can always say that there's going to be some flubs. It's not perfect. Canon does not mean it's perfect, right? There's going to be inaccuracies and what have you, but canon's supposed to be everything under one roof, right? Everything, like all the movies, the books, animated shows, the comics, et cetera, video games, they all are under one banner, and they all try to like read off the other, right? And obviously that's different because we didn't have that with George Lucas. George Lucas was very strictly, and I think he didn't care about continuity in the sense of like, I don't think he grew up having a love of an ongoing like story as far as that was beyond like 5 years, if that. Because the difference when he was growing up was he had everything that we all love now that was been on forever. He only had for a short period of time, like Flash Gordon. I'd only been around for a little bit. Everything was just starting when he was alive. So he didn't really care about like, this has to mean this and that. Like he didn't have that love of that ongoing massive story that you wanted to not only watch the movie of, but you wanted to read the comic and you wanted that to reflect each other. Back then, it's like you just kind of went, okay, this is the comic, this is the book, or whatever. I mean, I don't even know if Flash Gordon had comics at the same time the movies was coming out, or if that came afterwards. I have no idea. I'm not that much of a Flash Gordon fan, but Al Williamson, Chef's Kiss. If you know, you know. But the thing is that George didn't care about that, but he also not only didn't care or didn't grow up in that era, if you will. He also, I think, and he talked about this, and I think in the Splinter of the Mind's Eye book of the foreword, he really wanted to give what he wrote was artists to have the creative freedom of writing and doing what they want within reason. Obviously, within reason, yes, but George also did. If you read a lot of the EU, watch the Droids Ewoks cartoons, or whatever. Before, even during the Clone Wars, George did not care. I mean, the only time he cared, if it ever got and tried to tell his story that he wanted, like, I know, like, everyone loves Timothy Zahn. I don't really love Timothy Zahn, but that's a whole different podcast, I like to say. I mean, not as, obviously, the person he's fine, but I'm just saying, like, his work is not my favorite. Make that very clear. But during the epic Thrawn trilogy, he wanted to incorporate different aspects of Clone Wars, stuff like that. And he did a little bit that George let him, but he also, I think he stopped him from certain things. Like he would say, no, I'm going to tell that story. I want that to be completely free for me. But he pretty much let everyone do what they wanted. And, within reason. And I think that's pretty cool. But you also see, to be honest, and this, I'll wrap up here. Again, you get me going.
All good.
I won't shut up. But the thing is,
we can mute you anytime.
Oh, there you go. But I think with George, you saw the extreme problem with having no continuity. And I've had people I respect who are work in the industry and say like that it should be all its own thing. Well, we had that. and it was kind of a mess, to be quite honest, in my opinion. Like, there's great stories there. Don't get me wrong. I just went on This Comic Cooks, and we talked about Tales of the Jedi. That first volume is chef's kiss. It's amazing. I love this. Is my favorite Jedi stories of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But Golden Age of the Sith is bad. It's bad, like straight up awful. And so, and it's just wild. I mean, like, granted, like the canon now is wildly inconsistent, but at least I know what to expect, and there's an expectation, and I have like, there's a way I can go into things with a certain ease a little bit. Whereas like back in the day, it was like, does this even matter? Do I even care about this? So there is a lot of, you see the problems with canon now, because and there is issues, because the problem is now the comics, the books, they can't really do a whole lot because they're not the mainstream. So they're going to be delegated to having either explaining only minor characters, major stories, or major characters, minor stories. So there is a problem with that. I think that does happen. There is a problem. I think there is an issue with books and comics in the sense of probably sales could be better if they didn't have that, maybe. But at the same time, I think you're only like what we as fans, at least I'm speaking for, I think I'm speaking for most of us. I think most of us would rather have it all be connected than have it the way it was. Maybe some people don't, but I think the majority of us would, and it just makes sense in today's culture, especially with comics and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have Marvel and DC. Yeah, DC's rebooted 800 million times, but there is a sense of a source canon, if you will. And I'll end on this, and that's the one thing that I'm actually grateful for, is because I always bring up the Canon story. So in the Canon comics, they tell the story of how like Depa Billaba and his master, and they die, and how that whole thing goes down. But then Bad Batch comes in and tells it a little bit differently. The core things are all there. It's on the same planet. It's basically the same kind of idea. It's all the same idea is all there, but it's a snowy planet instead of a barren planet, and the Bad Batch are there.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. He still runs off. We don't know. He probably runs off to the Jarrus guy, but we don't see it on camera. But we assume it. It's all there, but the Bad Batch are there instead of the comic book. So tell me, what exactly is it contradicting? It's just contradicting the minor details. The major stuff is all there. It's still the same planet. It's just a little bit differently. So I feel like even like again, Dave Filoni is kind of doing this already a little bit too. Like the Ahsoka novel tells about the Maul and Ahsoka fight, right? It happens a lot differently in the Ahsoka novel, but they still have a fight on Mandalore, just like in the novel that it mentions. It's just the details are slightly off. So I feel like Dave Filoni is helping usher in how they're going to deal with continuity and canon. And in Tales of the Jedi, there's
stuff there too.
There's still the main stuff is there, but the exact details are different. To be honest, and I've said this before, I only care about the major stuff, right? Like I only care that as long as it's still somewhat cohesive, I'm good with that, because you can't stay verbatim all the time. It's just impossible, especially with how different mediums are going with it. So as long as it gets like, she fought a Inquisitor and took the crystal and made it her own, which is exactly what happens in the Ahsoka novel. Again, the exact details are not all there, but they're all similar. The main points are there. That to me is all that matters. To me, everyone can get hung up on the minor stuff. I think that's fair, but I think in the end, as long as it's not contradicting the major stuff, it really doesn't matter. But again, that's just my personal perspective.
And boy, do people love getting hung up on the minor stuff.
Yeah.
Really quick.
Yes.
There it is.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that's definitely Dark Horse. Dark Horse.
Looks like he just full on missed too. Just
I know.
Great with the blaster, but just not great hand
He's
to hand.
not even looking at the otter in that picture. He's like...
To be fair, who would want to hit an otter? They're adorable.
Actually, quite
South Park did
vicious.
it best. Adorable.
Yeah.
Oh, Canon to me, like I remember starting this podcast with Mark almost 2 years ago now, coming in to replacing someone who probably knew what Canon was, and all the guests and everything would be like, "Oh, it's Canon, this Canon." I was like, "What the hell are they talking about?" Well, I had no clue what the. So I go to Wikipedia and they're like, "This is Canon A, this is Canon B, this is Canon C, this is Canon D, this is George Canon." I was like, "What the hell?" I was so confused on where things were going. I mean, it helps me when the thing like, yes, you can say in the book this happened. It's the same thing with like Harry Potter and stuff. Everything when that came out, everyone's like, "Oh, the book was better." Well, the book's different. The book's a different medium. Like they can do things differently than you can with film medium. And to now, it just seems like people, I don't like it, and they can't express why, so they just say, "Oh, it breaks canon." That's why I don't like it. That's just what all comes down every time, because I've watched several from just for the Acolyte, just to see the other side of people who are hating it. And they never say anything that makes sense as to why they hate it. Like I've seen one where they just attack Leslie Headland. It's like, okay, you don't like her, so you hate her show. And the points you're making about her aren't really about her creativity or her work, or you're just mocking her appearance. And then you call them out on it. Well, she broke canon because of Kai Mundi. Okay, but you didn't get to the end of the season to see how she didn't break it. Like, just people are just so impatient and so eager to hate, and it's just easy to blame canon because they can't deal with what they're truly feeling and why they don't like it, because they know they're wrong, especially with the Acolyte, for feeling the way they feel. There's like a deep-seated wrongness. But as far as canon goes, since Disney took it over and made those like things, I look at Marvel. They kind of went overboard with their canon in the films and the TV shows. It became tedious to watch. Star Wars hasn't gotten there yet. I'm afraid they might, because if you miss this one thing and you watch this, like you're just so confused, you don't know what's going on. But they're not there, in my opinion. But it does help when everything kind of ties together. But at the same time, it was still fun when George was making the stuff, wasn't it? And maybe it was confusing, and maybe he didn't give a shit about canon, but it was still fun. You still enjoyed it. We're talking about it 50 years later. Like, come on.
And every story that I've heard about George, like on set, especially those original movies, he didn't care. This isn't a bad thing. He just didn't think that stuff was important. He was making this space fantasy, and they said, "Hey, is it Leia or Leah?" And he just goes, "It's a regional." Like he doesn't, he didn't really bother with that sort of stuff. But if you made that movie today, we would get 3-hour long YouTube videos talking about how terrible it is and how it doesn't line up with itself. And so, that wasn't his priority at the time. And I think there's something to that. It's a lot of people, especially with Acolyte, that were watching it and making these bad faith arguments because they, like you were saying, didn't like the creator. They didn't like, and it's coming at a time where we're in this really like big culture war atmosphere where all of a sudden they say like, oh, there's minorities, there's people that aren't like me in this, so that's what they hone in on. It's like, well, when you don't have anything constructive to say, then that's what you go for. You just go after the creator because, oh, I think they think differently than me, so I'm going to try to pick this apart. But that didn't happen when the originals came out. Nobody said they were too political, even though that's what they are. We got a little bit of that with the prequels because people thought the politics in them was boring. They didn't think, oh, they're making it political. They just thought, oh, I don't want to hear about trade disputes.
That's why I didn't like Star Trek, to be honest. I always thought it was boring because it felt too political. But
that's also my favorite argument when people say like, oh, Star Trek is too woke. I said, have you ever watched it? Like, that's just
that's the whole point.
That's the point of it. Yeah, that's
like Well, yeah, because like the original trilogy is like basically like the Vietnam War, like that's the whole thing there, and then the prequel trilogy is basically like the like the War on Terror, like early 2000s. Like there's like verbatim a line in one of those movies that someone took like from something that like Bush said back then.
It's the Anakin. If you're not with me, you're my enemy. You know.
Yeah.
He named Newt Gunray was Newt Gingrich. Yeah, like he wasn't especially subtle. Like,
plus it's called Star Wars. A war is inherently like a political like thing.
That's a good point. I mean, honestly, that's a really good point. I think that the thing with Canon, I think if we're talking about the Acolyte specifically, which has been a hot button for a lot of people online who want to, obviously make money off of people hating Star Wars, basically. I think the weird things about this specifically, which I think is hilarious, is these people act like that Leslie Headland and always and Disney in general are destroying and contradicting Star Wars, and I'm like, have you met George Lucas? Like, have you ever read or because listen, I'm not trying to boast here, but I have researched a lot of George. When the sequel trilogy was coming out, I was digging up. I could not get enough of George Lucas interviews. And I would scrounge up every YouTube video I could, every book I hadn't read, every source of information I could get about what he thought that would happen after Return of the Jedi. But that all led me down to obviously learning about the creation of the Star Wars trilogy, which if you just listen to George talk about anything over the years, it's all over the place of what he says. It's like, oh yeah, I meant for this. It's like, then 10 years later, it's like, oh yeah, I meant this. It's like, wait, that's not what you said here. But that's just kind of George as being, I mean, that's him kind of this, his mind's shifting, whatever. And what I want to mean by that is that George shifted around constantly. And he constantly was like, oh yeah, I don't care about this. I mean, it's kind of like this. People act like they will watch the Acolyte and they'll say, "Whoa, I can't believe this person did this. I can't believe it did that. Oh my God, this person said this and they're just calling contradicts this. What happened in the Darth Plagueis one time and whatever." And listen, want to know what something's hilarious is? Let's go to Exhibit A. And this is why I would love to get Star Wars Theory in an actual debate, actually have a legitimate debate, have someone mediate. That's paid to mediate, paid, right? There's no right or wrong. This person's here's your turn, here's your turn, and go, a true political debate. I would be, dude, get me on with this guy. Because the first thing I would say is, so tell me, when you're watching Return of the Jedi and Luke says, do you remember your mother, your real mother? And Leia goes, oh yeah, she was very sad. It's oh yeah, we all assume, oh yeah, she knew her mother. Prequel trilogy comes out, nope.
No way.
What? No, it can't happen. It's impossible. So what do? Nothing. We don't care. That's the point. It's just so stupid. It's oh my God. Yes, you look back, you're okay, how are you gonna do this? I've read Marvel comics since I can remember. And I can tell you, as I've read as an adult, as a 42-year-old man now, I can tell you how many retcons I have read and how many good and bad retcons. And there are ways around all this SH, right? Yeah. So anyway, I say all that because herein lies where the grift exists, right? It's not there. Yes, things are inherently imperfect. I get it. But things are also in flux, and that's the one thing that Dave Filoni is kind of learned. If you watch again, that's why I love watching featurettes about anything, whether it be filmmaking, comic book making, music record making. I love to go into the weeds because you learn so much. If you watch all those Clone Wars DVD special features, which they're so good, they're brilliant. Because it really does give you an insight of Dave Filoni's creation of the Clone Wars, and with George, you learn, I think, by osmosis, also how George is in general, and you could see the problem that Dave had with how do we balance? He wanted to balance EU and respecting fans because and he gets it. Like that's what makes Dave so good is he gets what the balance of, or he tried to figure out that balance and he understands it now, but he had to learn because George wanted to bulldoze everything. And he kind of like fought with George a little. I don't say fought, but he definitely like tried to like rein George in, but George like, no, you know? And so he kind of learned, I think, honestly, how to balance that. Because the Mandalore arc is a great example of if the initial one, if you watch the special features, you could tell like Dave's like, okay, here's all the Mandalore stuff that exists. And he's like, I don't care. I'm gonna do what I want. And so, but if you look like what they did now, all that stuff that we all thought existed now is in the Mandalorian. Like that's all there now. I mean, not like verbatim, it's not like one for one, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's been like they're able to incorporate that commando thing that we all read about back in the day or assume was happening. They've incorporated it, and I would say retcon, but I call it Jeff Johns in it because Jeff Johns does amazing things with history and continuity and incorporating different things. Again, I love Jeff Johns, I do. But so he's taken this whole idea now, but he's also taken the original concept that George wanted to do and built on top of it. And that's the thing that Dave Filoni has been great at, that I think a lot of the good writers working today, whether it be in movies or comics, that are dealing with an ongoing continuity, they understand I can build on top of something and not have to like, okay, I need to like, whatever. And I'll be honest, and this is not to bring up a hot button topic, but that's something that I think J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson both don't know how to do, to be quite honest. Unless they are the ones fully in charge, they struggle in that world. Dave Filoni doesn't, because he understands it. Again, I don't know if he read comics a bunch or whatever. I don't think so, or maybe he did, but not like love the continuity like I do, like in the Marvel universe or whatever. But I think the people working today and are growing up are understanding that concept of we don't have to tear down, we have to build on top. And it's and again, Rian Johnson and JJ will say they did that, but their movies say otherwise, in my opinion. I still like the sequel trilogy a lot. I love it, but they don't know how to do that as well as other writers coming up to it because they're in a vacuum. That's how they write, and that's the only way they know how to write, and that's fine. But you're seeing now someone like Dave Filoni build on top of everything with Ahsoka, with The Mandalorian, and it's no secret, in my opinion, why it's so successful. Besides, Grogu, but I think it's all there, right? I think that's why. Besides Grogu, take Grogu out of it, it's successful. Everyone complains about season 3, but whatever. I love season 3. But to me, it's successful because it's building off of what's come before, not tearing down and trying to rebuild it. So, sorry, long rant there.
Right. All good. So going on your J.J. Abrams comment, friend of the show and frequent guest Kenny Madison from Trek Wars podcast said it best. J.J. Abrams likes puzzles. He doesn't know how to solve them.
And I would say, and to argue that, I'm not trying to throw shade, but to argue, I would say Rian Johnson is a good storyteller and a great visual director, but he writes strictly in a vacuum. And because of that, there's a lot of problems in The Last Jedi for me. It still works in the context because I think Rise of Skywalker helps build off that, to be honest, but it does have to like go back and like redo some things, which I'll be honest, I liked, but that's my main problem though, is that I think we've had, so many people like Star Wars started off the Disney era with such a lack of vision, and because of that, and people didn't really know how to play nice with it because George, everything stopped and started with George. And, in the continuity and the ongoing storytelling, he was able to kind of get away with a lot of stuff because the buck stopped and started with him. So we all kind of knew, like, oh, we don't like Star Wars, we don't like the prequel trilogy, but it's George Lucas's fault, whatever. But then we all kind of accepted it because we just accept it because it's George. But now it's factions because it's not all George. It's multiple people that you can kind of like, there's camps of like, well, I love Rian Johnson. Well, I hate Rian Johnson. Well, I love this and I hate that. And I've said this before, and I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much, guys. I'm so sorry. I'll shut up after this. I promise. This is my last statement. I'll say, but I was talking to Vactor from this Comic Cooks and Vactorverse, and it kind of dawned on me. Maybe I'm just a real idiot, and I don't doubt it, but I kind of realized back. We're talking about back in the day in the '90s, and I said the one thing about what makes a difference in '90s and now. And it dawned on me, back in the 90s when George was trying to like throw out all this EU and it was hard, and we're all getting excited, it didn't matter that I didn't like the Crystal Star. It didn't matter that I maybe not liked, Truce of Bakura, or I didn't like Dark Empire, or I didn't like this story or that story or whatever. Because you know what we all cared about? We were Star Wars fans. And I'm not trying to be like kumbaya. I mean, being for real, because there was a badge of honor of like, oh, yeah, you don't like all this, but you still read it and gave it a chance, and because of that, we cool.
Right.
That no longer exists.
No.
That is now of, oh, you like this? Well, I hate this, so you suck, because that's not my Star Wars. That's what it's turned into. And that's what's unfortunate. But there's no way that exists now. You're never gonna get that away. That the toothpaste.
No,
the toothpaste is out of the tube, so it's there.
It's what makes money and drives clicks. So that's why they're.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is like a lot of the same people now that like vehemently hate or like claim to hate certain creators within Star Wars now are the same people that are like, oh, George Lucas sucks, and are more or less the reason why like he sold Lucasfilm to Disney so that he didn't have to have his hands on it anymore and didn't have to deal with be like, oh, why do you keep going back and doing this to that and this to that, and like people like rewriting history and are like, oh, I never disliked the prequels. I always liked the prequels. I've always liked them. They've always been amazing. I've always thought that. Where it's like a lot of like these creators that have like some of these channels too, that like with their whole thing like being like, now they'll aim it at like Kathleen Kennedy, or they'll basically anyone that is a person of color or of the female gender or identifies as the female gender that does something within the Star Wars universe, be like, well, we don't like that person, or it's just like whatever, or they get so upset about like the saying the Force is female, like
the Force is all encompassing, like Jesus
Christ. Yeah, it's
the thing. It's just people are so afraid to just be like, yeah, I watched it. I didn't like it, but I still like Star Wars. It's like, no, I didn't like it, so it sucks. It's not Star Wars. Like, okay.
It's okay to just think something's fine or not your thing. And I think that's what's lost in the grift culture. You either have to love it or hate it. And it's like, yeah, for me, the sequel trilogy is a mixed bag, but I still really enjoy it. Like for me, Last Jedi is my favorite of the three. I kind of feel like the Rise of Skywalker was them feeling like they needed to course correct, but our
podcast is called the Holdo Maneuver.
Yeah, you can just say like, hey, this isn't for me. Like for me, I'm with Bad Batch, things like that. Like the clone stuff is not really my thing. Like I don't have a huge investment in it, and that's fine. I'll watch it. I'll skip some of it maybe if I'm not into it, but. You can't make that your entire personality, just hating something, unless that's your job. And then obviously that's what they have to do. But like with the prequels coming out and people rewriting history, like I was 10 years old when The Phantom Menace came out, so probably the peak, like that's target audience. And even that, like I thought that movie was great when I saw it, and then a couple years leading or after it, that's when you started really hearing people saying like, "Oh, this is terrible," or maybe I just didn't hear it.
I remember
at first.
that.
But yeah, it's like, no, you don't rewrite history. Like it's, and the same thing's going to happen with the sequels. It's, that's going to come around and just say, okay, well, no, these are really great because they're going to hate whatever the next thing is.
Yeah,
So,
it's just. I remember watching when the prequels came out, being obsessed with Phantom Menace because I was 13 when it came out, and it was just so cool. The pod racing, so great. And then, like, I remember by the time at watching Attack of the Clones, it was cool to hate Star Wars. So you kind of like, I pretended that I didn't like it. I pretended that like, oh yeah, it's fun to bash on it. And then now it's like, I can respect them for what they are. I enjoy them. I'll watch them every year. Same with the sequel trilogies. Like, I remember I watched it with my brother and his partner out. Like, I think it was Force Awakens that I watched, and his partner being 20 years older than me was like, "Oh, that was trash." I was like, "What are you going to do now?" I was like, "I'm going to watch it again." What do you mean, what am I going to do now? I enjoyed it. Like, it's still Star Wars. Like, it's just continuation of the story. It's telling more of the stories, building this world that we haven't had.
Yeah,
I've said on here before, like, how blessed are we that we just get more Star Wars continuously. Like, you can not like something, you can just leave it, but we have the option to just see more Star Wars, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I think you may have said it, or someone said it at some point, where it was that because we have such an embarrassment of riches of Star Wars now, you can pick and choose of Star Wars you want to watch and what you want to enjoy. And then if there's something of it that you don't enjoy, don't watch it. And then you don't need to crap on somebody else's fun that they're having watching that thing. You don't like it? All right, move on. Watch the thing that you like. Or it's like, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic because these same people who will criticize like the Acolyte, and I want to talk about Acolyte in here in a second too, to be honest. But it's funny because Star Wars Theory himself, and I wish I could like have actual sit down like a debate conversation, because he'll crap on this, like Acolyte, which again, Acolyte has some creative, brutal decisions. I'll be honest.
There's some things that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say it's flawless by any stretch of the imagination, but this guy has the nerve to criticize it when he's also like writes his fan fiction and talks about having Jedis having like heat and frozen powers. Like, what the hell, dude? Like, you have no right to talk. Like, sorry, like what? Like, you're gonna act about breaking canon, but your Jedi can like control like fire and what? It's like, no, like you can't. And then you also selling your own lightsaber designs. I mean, come on. Anyway,
or a short film that's 90% AI generated. Just maybe shut up.
By the way, also not only 90% AI, but it's like it's supposed to be dark hair by the comic book, and the comic book is like a stylized, beautiful, rendered pages by Cam Kennedy, and he throws AI on it and being like, "Oh yeah, this is an homage." It's like, dude, you're desecrating a man's beautiful images. It's that just drives me nuts.
Or
anyway.
like a friend of the show, Dakota, who I don't remember which episode it was of the Acolyte, but he came on. He just put out a video that's, if Adam or Paul, if you haven't watched it, you should really check it out.
I'm gonna watch it eventually.
It's great. I just watched it a couple hours ago. Yeah.
And what's amazing is that he made the thumbnail to make it. He made the thumbnail basically as a homage to the clickbaity thumbnails, and he put them on there. And, it's got the red laser eyes on a person that's not a dude on it. It's got the black.
It's actually pretty
red.
Accurate.
Yeah. Well, because he wanted some basically examples of how it should look. So I just Googled clickbaity Star Wars thumbnails, and the like first 4 that showed up all looked like that, and they all had, you know, the usual suspects in their
Kathleen
their
Kennedy
thumbnails.
with laser eyes, and
Yeah,
Ugh.
and they were all from the accounts that you would assume the accounts they were from. But yeah, like I would highly recommend anyone that's watching this that hasn't watched Dakota's video to check it out, because he goes through, I think it's like 20 points.
It's intense.
That like these deep thinkers, as he called to them, like brought up during the course of Acolyte, and Dakota also has issues with the show, but like actual like good faith criticisms about like the pacing,
and those
like,
are
like they're not like, why is there fire in space? Well, did you watch A New Hope? There's fire in space in that. Did you watch the Phantom Menace
movie?
R2's literally fixing the same thing that
also
that OSHA is fixing.
It was just cool. Who cares?
Yeah, it's a galaxy far, far away. Maybe there's different, like maybe science.
How come every planet has oxygen and the same time rotation and the same path around the suns?
To quote one of my favorite podcasts, The Weekly Planet, they talk about Star Wars, and they said, you know, we have no reference for like what these people are actually like. They could all be 1,000 years old and 100 feet tall.
Exactly.
Like, we don't know what world they're in.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but it's like when you brought up the whole, you know, how old they are, like with Keanu Mundy and Darth Plagueis, and I know Star Wars theory was like, it's like, guys, you have to realize like, this is not verbatim from the EU canon. Like that doesn't matter at all. Like they can do it can twist things for their, you know, to what they're doing now, and it was fine. Like everyone's like, well, how does they don't know about this and they don't know about that, and how does he know about this? It's like, guys, like it's gonna work out. Like, you know, not only that, but like think about like it's like think about this, right? It's like again going back to their complaint about the show, but what about when George was like, you know, hey, he will, you know, go to the Dagobah system. There you'll learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me. Well, guess what? All of us people who grew up on only those 3 movies all said, oh, the guy who trained Obi-Wan Kenobi was Yoda. That was his master. That's who he trained under. Phantom Menace comes out. Nope. Surprise. It actually didn't happen that way. And the thing is that like a lot of us were like, what the hell? Like that doesn't make any sense, right? It totally contradicted what we assumed thought was the right answer, right? And that's the thing about like ongoing storytelling, and you go backwards, you're gonna fidge a little bit. There's gonna be some like, you know, whatever. It's a little bit different, but it's the same idea, right? And that's what is so crazy to me, is that like it's because they need to drive those clicks, they're gonna focus on this and not focus on the other things. And it's like, why? Like it's, or not why. I know why, obviously, but I mean, it's such bad faith. It's obnoxious, and it sucks because I'll go on, you know, X. I hate calling it X.
It's called Twitter. That's what it is.
I know. I know.
They're still called tweets.
Yeah, there you go.
No, they're called posts. They changed it.
Oh,
that's a whole. That guy's the biggest, one of the biggest grifter. Anyways, yeah, we'll just.
But like the thing is, you know, I'll go on there and I'll engage people, and I'll have people be like, oh yeah, this sucks. I'm like, that's all right, you know. And listen, I've gone on record saying Acolyte, I've had some beef with the show, like some legit, like, oh my god, like I always say, is it Tobin, whatever the hell his name is, whatever his name is, it's like Torben. Why do they call him so close to his character from Game of Thrones? It's annoying.
It's a nod. I mean, he died the same way.
Fair.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
Spoilers, I guess,
like,
for Game of Thrones.
Dude, his like beard and hair in the second episode is so bad. It's like, I don't know how they let that go. And like
it's the Crix Maydeen Return of the Jedi beard, you know, that just glued on.
But see, when I grew up, I thought that beard was legit. It still looks legit to me. It looks better than what they have in this, but like also with the Wookiees, like, and doing his like, you know, gold digging or is digging for gold, searching for gold, you know,
metal detector thing. Yeah,
it's like, come on, guys, like why do you let that go? Like that stuff is crazy to me. because I watch other parts, and it's amazing. And so it's like it's a bummer because there's legitimate stuff about it that's like it's kind of a bummer about, and there's also legitimate stuff that are it's amazing and great, not just the fight scenes, but some of the great stuff with with Saul and everything. So I've given the show about a B-, and I think I'm being pretty fair to it all the way around because I want to go towards a B, but I feel if I'm being a legit criticism like of the show, there are some cheap moments that make it look kind of bad. And like, I have to go back to that B-. But at the same time, when it hits, it freaking hits. So, I mean, I like the show a lot still, I'll be honest. We have to have season 2. But it's not perfect by any means, but it's not complete dog crap. Everyone makes it those.
No, it's not 14% Rotten Tomatoes, whatever they got it down to.
Yeah, it's and I think to me, like in terms of canon, a lot of the like canon complaints that people have are just solved by watching the rest of the series. And there's like, well, why does Eddie Mundi know about this? It's like, well, it turns out he didn't know anything about that, but like just watch the series. And it's the same thing, with Phantom Menace. Like, okay, so Yoda didn't instruct Obi-Wan, but then you see in Attack of the Clones, it's like, well, he taught all of the kids for a time.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, look, that fixed that. Like, and it's it's true from a certain point of view. So there's no real continuity issues there. They figured it out, and that's kind of I think the way that the Acolyte works is like you just have to watch the show. Like you can't look at it like a movie. It's not. It's a different medium, and that's fine. You just have to stick around.
I think people asking those questions are probably the same people that watch a movie with you and ask you why something's happening. You're like, well, watch the entire movie all the way through, and usually those questions you have might be answered by the time the movie. If they're still not answered by the time the movie's over, then ask that question. But don't ask halfway through.
But and like Adam brings up a great point. Like, and we're talking about like watch the show. Here's the problem, though, right? Is that by the Netflix model, both is good and bad in certain ways, right? So if you dump it all at once, people binge it, they do their thing, and then it goes away. And then you have Game of Thrones was a great example. At first, why it's great because people I prefer that personally, but here's the problem: what it's turned into, and it's evolved over the years. It's turned into paying these guys as mortgage. It's better for them, for those people like Star Wars Theory, but the problem is by releasing it every week, you're giving these grifters their way to pay their mortgage every week and being, oh, okay, cool. So where can I take this and be, do, whatever, like Star Wars 3 does his live streams, right? Okay. Well, if imagine doing it, if it was a binge, it'd be harder for him to make money and monetize if it's all dumped at once, and he can't like sit back and go, well, Kid of Monday, oh my God, everyone. Like imagine if they released it all at once, it'd be like it wouldn't be able to, it was not sustainable. But because Star Wars comes out, when it's released once a week, and he can go out and start
binge it. Let's go.
Well, I know, I agree, but there's a pro and a con to it, right? So that's, I know. So that's the kind of problem now is that these people have every week they have to it's money in the bank for them. They're like, oh sweet, I can put money in the bank. I can buy a new car or whatever. Star Wars Theory brags about making 7 figures, whatever, a year. And it's like, okay, well, that's the reason why is because by releasing it every week, it gives him instant content. Whereas before he'd have to probably actually work for it and be like, well, I have to mine this 8-episode series and figure out everything, whatever. And let's be real. The reason why it's able to be sustainable is because people are interested in it. If they put it all at once, the allure and the popularity goes away weeks after it goes out, right? So it just gets less and less popular on YouTube searches as if they release it all at once. So that's the thing about it is I almost feel like Batman. We talked about Batman the Caped Crusader, right? They just kind of threw it all at once, and no one got that mad about the Penguin female character because they kind of dropped it all at once. They kind of announced it, and the grifters couldn't go back and like try to like mine it because no one really cares because the whole series is out. So I feel that the way it's released is like what Adam was kind of saying. Like, watch the whole thing. If people were allowed to do that, I think it would eliminate a lot of their content and these like hate videos or these reaction videos they do that do garner up so much like animosity and starts, feeding the frenzy, if you will.
Yeah. I think for me, that's one of the things that bums me out like the most, at least about, I don't know if that's just how.
That you're not able to binge it? Is that what you're saying?
No, like as far as like if someone's watching like this right now on YouTube, like when we did our Imperial March Madness, that was one of the things that bummed me out about it, was that like how like that was unintendedly like feeding like negativity from it, where it was like meant to just be like a fun thing of like, which one do you like more? It wasn't meant for like people in the comments of that to be like bashing each other, be like, oh, the holiday special is way better than The Last Jedi, or like Young Jedi Adventure. Like, and then I was like, why are you bringing Young Jedi Adventures into this? I got something, but
for the
like,
record, Young Jedi Adventures is underrated, by the way.
Yeah,
I legitimately like that show.
Like that like it just feels like hate, like in general. This is probably like a wider culture thing, but like that hate in general, like you used to be people would say like sex sells, but now it feels like hate sells. Like
sex still sells.
Hate. Well, I mean, I guess that's a whole different genre of something. Hate and that. So, but yeah, like that's the real bummer thing is like sometimes you like see like, we made fun of like those kind of thumbnails, but like you look at those thumbnails sometimes and then you see like it's got 20,000 views and it's only been out for like 2 hours. You're like, why? Like also, I mean, I guess we also don't know like the fall off of like how many seconds in people stopped watching it, maybe, but long enough where it still counted as like a view for it.
Well, it's only like 15-30 seconds.
Yeah, but so like as far as like models of like to follow for stuff like that, I feel like like Star Wars Explained, where like they actually have like legitimate like criticisms of stuff. They don't like try to sell the hate, like the grift of like, oh, or like we don't like Kathleen Kennedy, we don't like Leslie Hudson.
And listen, I'm not the biggest Explained fan, and not just because I'm like I have no problem with him personally as a person, like the other idiots, but I'm not the biggest fan of that because there is a connotation of like, I know he's got criticism. I haven't watched anything with him in like years, but when I watched it, there was criticism in here and there, but like also feels like there is a sense of like, I have to do this. I have to like this because this is how I pay my mortgage, those kinds of things. It's like, there is inherently, for me, when I watch it, I do have that connotation when I watch it, whether it's legit or not. There is that there because there is a sense of like, he's not going to just flat out to me like hate something. Even if he did, that's just my impression. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but that is my inherent like bias, I guess, when I watch it. And I think it's easy to get that also too. It's a stereotype, you could say, right? It's not good, but it's just kind of it's built into me. So I'm turned off by that as well because it's too much the other side. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just being real,
I can kind of see that in a way too.
Yeah, but again, I'm not. I have no ill will for that person and his wife at all. Like I make that very clear. I think they're doing is totally cool and legit. It's better than what the other idiots are doing. But I personally I can't get into that because it feels too much one-sided for me. I like discourse, but I also don't like bigots and racists and people trying to monetize off for money either. So, like, screw those people. Sorry, I've tried to say the F word. I try to refrain.
We're far enough in. It's okay.
But yeah, like I just, it's
you can say the Force.
Yeah, there you go. But like the thing is, for me, I love to hear people's opinions when they're legit and legitimate. Like me and my friends, my friend Kyle from the Saga Continues, we have ranted and raved and argued and yelled at each other about The Last Jedi versus Rise of Skywalker, because I'm Rise of Skywalker and I'm anti Last Jedi pretty much, and we'll just like go into it, and Tim, our poor Tim's just like, but I love that. I love it because to me, you need whether or not no one's going to convince me The Last Jedi is the superior film. It's just never going to happen. It's never going to happen. But the thing is, I want to know what that other person's thinking and hear their perspective, because maybe down the road it'll help inform me about something later on. It may not be The Last Jedi. That ship has sailed, just like the ship has sailed for him to Rise of Skywalker. But hearing that insight, even though it may not affect me for that film or whatever that is at that moment, it will help me improve, in my opinion. This is with any arguments. This is philosophical overall. It will help me improve my understanding of other perspectives down the road, whatever I'm processing, and that'll make me a better person. I think, in my opinion. But but again, people just want to hate and say you suck because of it, whatever. But I do feel there is a good there is a positivity to having civil discourse, and that's why it informs us. And that's the problem with it's not like to monetize and to make money and to stir the pot so we can just have this spinning wheel of either positivity or complete hatred. Like there is a happy medium, which is impossible to find these days, which I think it will happen, but yeah, it does suck, because I do feel like the people who are in the discourse will say, well, you're just a shill, you just love this. And it's like, no, homie.
Proud shill right here.
Yeah, well, I'm not a shill. You can call me a shill, that's fine. But I'm not. I can tell you right now, I don't love The Last Jedi. People think that I'm on one of them. I'm like, no, I'm not one of you. Sorry to break it to you, but because I do like.
I mean, you still did come on a podcast called the Holdo Maneuver.
Yeah, I do. I legitimately love, just for if you guys don't know, I do love The Last Jedi, the Luke and Kylo Ren and Rey stuff, minus how Rey or how Luke and Kylo, that whole story. I could go on for hours about that. How I hate that. And I also hate Ray Rando, but all that got fixed for me. That's fine. I'll argue that too. Ray Skywalker is chef's kiss. I love that. I will, as someone who's adopted, that means a lot to me. So there is a personal connection, but again, different podcast. I just talked about it on the Star Wars Newsnet show with my buddy Tyler. We talked about the future of Ray Skywalker and things like that. So it's really fun. Go check that out. But yeah, there is, I feel like there has to be a honest, I want to be somewhere in the middle, and not just I want to be, because I just feel like I'm naturally just always there. I'm not going to love and hate everything. So, whatever.
And people just need to be okay with being like, that wasn't good. I didn't like it. And you don't have to attack it for if you're attacking the person instead of the argument, you lost the debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
I am sorry to tell you all that art is objective. It can only mean one thing.
Yeah, and it's okay. Like we said earlier, you can watch everything Star Wars. Be like, I like that. I didn't like that. That's fine. There's so many stories out there that suck, and there's so many that are amazing, and there's so many that are just meh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not this big crisis where you have to attack LGBTQ and the creators and what was her name? Kathleen Kennedy. She could pull the plug at any point in time, and we won't have Star Wars ever again. And she doesn't.
And she produced basically every single movie that you've ever loved. And you didn't choose until she became the head of Lucasfilm to start hating on her.
I'll be honest, guys. I think she needs to go, personally. I mean, I'm being serious. I think she needs to go. I think
it's fine.
Leadership.
Yeah, but see, you're really saying it in a measured way. You're not
I have no opinion on her one way or the other, so it's fine.
The difference is, I'd say about Kathleen Kennedy is just it's it's been a mixed bag, and she's in charge of Star Wars. I mean, she mishandled the sequel trilogy. Even though I like the sequel trilogy, I think she mishandled it. She was smart to put Dave Filoni and Favreau together, which I don't know. It's that whole story is weird, to be quite honest, but I digress. But like she greenlit The Mandalorian, and that's been incredible. I mean, I like most stuff she's greenlit. I love Solo, I love Rogue One, So it's like I like a lot of stuff, but I just feel like when I hear her talk about Star Wars and some of the contradictory things she says, or just kind of things I'm like, why would you say that? It's like
she's trying to appeal. She's trying.
Well, she's trying, but she's also saying the wrong things. And I'm like, you need to have someone who understands the brand. I don't think she understands the brand, to be quite honest. She understands storytelling, how to make stories, because she's a producer. That's what she's good at. She's good at creating and making like content. That's what, and again, and she's done a good job, I think, for the most part, understanding what she's making though. And that's why I'm like, I think it's time for her to leave. I think it's time because I think if you got someone in there that would actually, I think a new face of Lucasfilm. And again, it could be. I'm not saying it has to be a male. I'm not saying it has to be, or it has to be a female. Just find someone in there.
Let's make it Weird Al. Let's put him in charge.
Dude, I'd love Weird Al. I'd be all.
He gets Star Wars. He's into Star Wars.
Scarif Beach Party.
But with Filoni being in charge of like one of the higher up people, like in his role right now, it does help a little bit, like kind of bridge that gap, which we didn't have before. I will say that even though that you have that, you do need someone. I think you need to have someone who understands, I think, the greater picture of the whole brand, not just I make movies and TV shows.
I don't remember exactly what the promotion title was or whatever it is, but I do know that Filoni did recently have some kind of promotion where he had,
head of creative or something.
Yeah, like where like where Kathleen Kennedy basically is, just if you put it like in an equation of like she would like Bob Iger is still the Bob Iger, but like if you put it in that kind of like space where like say like Bob Iger and Kevin Feige for Marvel, like that kind of like thing where like Kevin Feige kind of is both like a producer and the kind of creative producer, but where it feels like, I think at least with what Filoni's been up to at Lucasfilm, where it's kind of like now she's more of in kind of like that Bob Iger-esque role for Lucasfilm, and then Filoni's kind of in kind of like the first 10 years of Marvel Studios Feige role for Lucasfilm now, where it's kind of like they're sharing, like, because she, like you said, like is really good at, producing, getting stuff out, like getting ideas developed and whatnot. And then Filoni's really good at then constructing like how those stories are all going to come together and bringing on certain people that like, because a lot of the directors that have done a lot of the shows have like stayed on to do different ones now too. Like Bryce Dallas Howard has done a lot of them, and just her. Who else?
And Favreau's a big.
Deborah Chow, yeah.
But Favreau's a big reason too.
Yeah, Favreau as well. I mean, Marvel there too. So,
but to be fair, I think here's a difference, and everyone wants to compare Feige and Kennedy, and they're such different brands, obviously, and different people and different experiences. The one thing I would say that is critical for that Kevin has that Kathleen doesn't is understanding the brand. And the thing is, like,
you're very valid there. You're right.
Yeah, like Kevin Feige understands Marvel. Like that's why but the difference is that he has a treasure trove of stories like to literally adapt, whereas Kathleen Kennedy felt like, oh, I can't really do that, which is weird. Like, cause again, as someone, we just talked about the EU, right? I don't love the EU, the original EU. It's not all great. There are great things you can mine from it. And I feel like you're getting that with Filoni a little bit, obviously. But Kathleen Kennedy felt like you couldn't really do that. And it was weird. So I don't know. Like that to me right there shows you the difference between the two people the roles are different. But in the end, I think Kevin understands the brand of Marvel. Obviously. And Kathleen doesn't quite get it to that level of Star Wars. She gets it to an extent, but not. It doesn't need where it needs to be now. It's passed her by, in my opinion. Like it's bigger than what she's ever. It's beyond her comprehension and ability to successfully navigate with, and I think it's evident through the things that have fallen through the inconsistencies of the work we're getting. I just think it's evident. So that's why I think it needs to be a new leadership there. But I don't know. We'll see.
One of the things I wanted to go back to really quick was that, like, kind of brought up Pelagus and like different like expanded universe stuff or legend stuff that like people like some of like the creators might get, or sorry, the deep thinkers might get upset about like them breaking canon when they're not breaking canon. You should actually then be thanking the shows at that point, because they're actually now making these characters that you liked canon again. Because if Pelagus hadn't shown up in the Acolyte, he technically wouldn't be canon still at this point. Like,
other than
really
a random mention.
Yeah, really quick. Paul has to head out, so thank you, Paul, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, dude.
Yes,
yeah. Thanks you guys. Adam, nice meeting you. Hit me up on socials. I'm on X, formerly Twitter. Hit me up on that. I'll follow you back too. And Mike, I'm not sure if you're going on Twitter. Hit me up too.
I'm on there, but I don't do much with it since Elon took it over. I kind of just ignore it.
Fair. Hey, that's fair. That's fair. But if you guys, if you do partake, please, Adam, hit me up. I would love that. You're very nice and an enjoyable person. I hope to have you back on the show or be with you on again on the show sometime.
Absolutely.
And Mark, man, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you inviting me, and I'll come on hopefully again soon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, guys.
All right. Have a good night.
Later, Paul.
Night.
Bye.
So now that he's gone, now we can talk about all. No. But yeah,
here's Star Wars theory.
That would be kind of fun, because then Adam would just like verbally beat the crap out of.
Paul might jump back on if he found out. He told him that.
Yeah, I think he might get jealous.
Yeah, but kind of finishing like that thought is like, that's what I always think is funny about some of like these things that they get upset about, is that like Thrawn again wasn't canon again until he was brought back and made canon again in Rebels, and then again in Ahsoka and the newer books.
Rebels season 5. What?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was also in the animated Rebels show too.
I know that. I'm just saying Ahsoka just felt like Rebels.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't watched Rebels, that was the sense I got.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. And it's
it's like you were saying, it's the fact that with all of the beef people have with Acolyte, that's the one where we're getting the most kind of infusion of this Legends material, like like deep cuts, and they're like, oh, cortosis, and things like, or the fact that it's also the issue with their big concern was that Plagueis has been staying in this cave his entire life. That's not Plagueis in the novels. He's hidden in plain sight. It's like, again, you've got to, like, you can't. It's the Rey being stuck on Tatooine thing that they were pushing for a while, where it's like, oh, so she just ends up there and never leaves, and like, no. Like, if you have like an ounce of media literacy, like that's who would make that assumption? Like, it's the same thing with Plagueis being in the cave. It's like, no, he's
you just saw him
in there checking
seconds.
in. Yeah, he's in there checking in on possibly his apprentice, possibly not. We don't know yet.
I saw one thing where it said he was supposed to be 13 years old or something like that.
Oh,
yeah, that was one of the
Star Wars theory.
Yeah.
Okay, that's who posted. I just saw a reference somewhere.
I said, he'd be maybe 15 at the time. It's like, well, also
Dakota busted that too.
Oh yeah, that was right. That video is great. He the fact that he said, in the book, which again is not canon, they asked him like, oh, how old are you? And he said, well, in your human years, I'd be well over 100. I'm like, well, that's pretty vague. So And again,
in dog years, I'm well over 100.
And it doesn't matter. Like it's pretty inconsequential.
Yeah.
Do we want a good story? And Star Wars Theory was one of the people that said, "Oh, Acolyte better have Plagueis in it," and then Plagueis showed up, and then he got mad. So
that's how it goes.
That would have been like me, because like after we watched that first episode, I was like, I don't need to see Yoda in it, but I'm not going to be upset if Yoda shows up. And who showed up in the last 5 seconds of the finale?
Who predicted that was going to happen? Check the tape.
I didn't say he wasn't going to show up. I just said that I wasn't going to be upset if he showed up one way or the other.
That's all I was saying. And Paul mentioned it, and I was kind of remiss that I didn't get to it while he was here. Mentioned Solo. And I remember when Solo came out, and that was like the first instance of in-person hate I saw since Disney took it over. Because someone they were mad that it got jammed down their throats, which again, that was a terrible move by Disney. It was a money push, and they rightfully so be mad about that. But then at the same time, the person never watched Solo and said it sucked. And I was like, you haven't watched it. Oh yeah, but Disney put it out too soon, and they're just trying to get money from me, so it sucks. How can you say the thing sucks? Like, go watch it. Solo's amazing.
Brings it back to the Acolyte being like review bombed like weeks before it ever even aired. Like, how are you? What? Even the reviewers and critics that got copies of it haven't seen it yet. So how are you reviewing it?
And there are legitimate criticisms of Solo. Like, I get that. Like, for me, it's the fact that it's kind of a Frankenstein of, 2 different movies, because they just abandoned ship.
I'm not saying Solo is Oscar worthy.
No, but I thought it was
the hell out of that movie.
I thought it was fun, and I just think, if it was the Lord and Miller version, that who knows, it could have been more coherent for me. But I also think the lesson that Disney took from that is, we're not going to recast these people because that didn't go well, and that is the last lesson that they should learn from that movie. Like, Alden Ehrenreich was great.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Like he I think he's a good actor. I don't think you don't get an impressionist. Like, you get someone who can embody the spirit of Han Solo.
Harrison Ford.
Yeah, like I don't want to see any more of that nightmare fuel, like de-aging AI. Like,
make him Red Hulk.
Yeah, we just don't like just recast. It's gonna be fine if you really want to see these characters, or if you don't, that's great, because there are so many different time periods we can go to and not get caught up in this original trilogy time period or the prequels. Like, I love that the High Republic is being explored, and they've mostly kept that to books and comics aside from the Acolyte, which I think is also kind of a smart move, because then it's not as impenetrable. People can just appreciate that and go, I don't have to have read 1,000 comic books to understand this.
Right here.
Yeah. It's like, cool. I can just watch this one thing, or I could just read this one thing, and it's a standalone thing. It's cool.
Yeah, that was my intro to the High Republic, was the Acolyte. So
yeah,
and that was partly why I said I didn't need to see Yoda in the show, because then if he
wasn't needed.
Yeah, because like if he's not in the show, then it can. I mean, even that's another thing. Like, I was also fine with Ki-Adi-Mundi in there too, but I was like,
who cares?
Even if those two characters didn't show up in it, and there's like literally no connection whatsoever to anything that we saw before, outside of like base concepts of like the Force and Jedi and stuff, I would have been fine with that. But I was also okay with Ki-Adi-Mundi showing up. I was also okay with Yoda showing up.
Maybe he's just a raging drunk, and they don't pay any attention to him.
Yeah,
he's like, I know 1,000 years. Yeah, we're talking here. Grown-ups are talking.
Maybe when we hear Yoda talk during the High Republic, maybe whatever happened to him hasn't happened yet, and he's just talking like this.
My theory is he gets this debriefing on Soul, and he just strokes out and starts talking that way.
I think I just love with the Ki-Adi-Mundi thing, because they were so concerned about that, and I think it was intentional putting him in there, because
100%.
Because especially when they announced that, they said, there can't be Sith, because he said that they haven't been around for 1,000 years, and it's like, but also they're wrong in that movie.
Yeah.
So it was intentional. Like,
and also he never heard, and then by the end of this season,
it was covered
the story he would have heard would have been this story about Saul. So
yeah,
to
so
him,
it's there's no Sith around there.
And who knows the rule of two in the Phantom Menace? The person that's told the actual story at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So it all makes sense still.
Yeah, it's Yoda being shady.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Political. Politics.
I feel like that's a good spot to wrap it up, and that everybody, that's what canon is. So now you know what it is. Now you know what
Get away from us a little bit, but
yeah, you know what grifting is. You know what canon is.
We grifted you about what canon is. Maybe.
Except that we didn't. All right. But thank you everybody
we can
for
rename
checking this episode. We thank Adam for joining us.
Yeah.
We thank Paul, who has gone to join
He's a Force ghost now.
The Force Netherworld.
He's off fighting the Rise of Skywalker battle.
There you go. But yeah, that's how we're going to fight, that's how we're going to win, by not fighting what we hate, but saving what we love.
There we go.
So you can find us at holdopod.com or holdomaneuver.com if you can spell maneuver.
No one can.
Mike can't, so that's why we have.
That's right. That's why I binge watch everything, because I can't spell.
Yeah. But yeah, you can find us on all social medias at holdopod.
At those right there.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah, but thanks again, Adam, for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
And as always, we are grateful to George Lucas for creating the Star Wars universe.
Oh dear, thank the maker. I am too tired to do that.
All right.
Bye, everybody.